Hello and welcome to another episode of Contra Mundum. I am your host, Andrew Isker, and with me is the other host, CJ Engel. Hello, CJ. How are you?
Doing well. This is our first emergency broadcast. We didn't plan on this, but it's necessary. We had something recorded yesterday, you and I, but we're going to push that off because of the happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, things are actually happening.
It seems to be explosive, not like the Ukraine stuff, which is basically just fake and prolonged. But this also seems like it's going to be really fast. Not in terms of it's going to last quickly. It's not going to last a long time, but in terms of how quickly things are going to change and transform domestically and internationally. I mean, this could be a big one. So we wanted to make sure that we got an episode in on the Israel Hamas conflict. So
yes.
With that said, it's getting heated out there in terms of war propaganda. It reminds me, I haven't seen anything like this. I mean, obviously COVID was really intense propaganda, but really in terms of war, the last time we saw this was basically with weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So I think something big.
Yeah, something along these lines. And that's, I think, the first place to start. There has been a ton of controversy over some of the claims. And so, like, to begin with, I mean, there is the claim about Hamas going in and killing 40 Israeli babies, cutting their heads off, things like that. And it isn't as though Hamas didn't murder hundreds of people, men, women, and children in Israel. Like, no, I don't think anyone who's worth talking about is disputing that, right? That they did that. Like, everybody gets that. Everybody knows that they're evil, sadistic killers.
Well, what's more interesting though is how this came about. I mean, because like it's funny the way that the narratives kind of gain ground organically. I mean, this was basically a rumor said by a soldier as he was walking through an area. A journalist basically overheard it and then tweeted about it. And then everyone started pushing back, and so they had to cling to it, right? Because they can't be caught in these lies. And so this is just how narratives take, a life of their own. And then they were asking for proof and evidence of this stuff because all of it was unsubstantiated. Even the Biden administration was like, we didn't hear anything about this.
Well, yeah, so after Biden says he saw the photographs, and then the White House is like, well, actually, we didn't see any photographs.
So, I mean, but this is the way 21st century war propaganda works. It's all live. Literally, I mean, these people that are pushing narratives have to be on the ground. They have to be pivoting very quickly. They have to be very flexible. They have to be prepared for all types of, debunking. Like, there's hordes of people online just ready to debunk things on either side. So it's it's total ideological war. I mean, this is like Alex Jones level war for your mind. It's literally like you got to be careful out there because you're gonna believe stuff. It's gonna look really real. And now Netanyahu tweets out this evidence, using these charred figures, and it's really hard to tell what it is. Ben Shapiro, who's hysterical right now, he's completely unhinged. He tweets it out. He's not as unhinged as Jordan Peterson, which is really funny. But he tweets out this photo, and then people start doing AI checks on it, right? And some AI generators are saying it's fake, some are saying it's real. So it's really hard to know what's going on, but the chaos is just unreal.
And in the age of AI, how do you know things are real? That's the thing, right? One way or the other. And the difficult thing here is, and it's a tough. I mean, this is why propaganda is effective, because it's a very tough line to walk. Because if you dispute something, right? If you dispute that this event happened, or this particular incident they've grabbed hold of happened. It looks like you're being sympathetic to Hamas, right? It's like, why do you want it to be not true?
Yeah,
And
that's just the
it's
way propaganda works.
yeah, and it's like, well, why do you want it to not be true? You obviously you're like BLM and the DSA and all the lefties who are waving Palestinian flags, right? And it's like,
It,
no, I just
no,
don't want to be lied to.
it's like
I
it's like
don't
it's
like
like
to.
Pearl Harbor. Like when FBR was blamed for knowing in advance that it was going to happen, and people would point that out, and they're like, "Okay, so you're pro-Nazi then?" It's like,
Yeah,
no, this. Yeah,
you're the
I don't want
side
to
of
be
the
lied into
Japanese.
war.
Yeah,
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 so this is
exactly,
it's always been
exactly.
this way. This isn't new. It's just quicker. It's more intense, but we also have better tools. We're also more
Yeah,
cynical now than we were back
oh,
then.
much more cynical.
I think
Yeah.
you and I, our generation, is much more adept at interpreting things than our parents' generation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, and to be fair to the older generation, we always want them to be kind of the whipping boy, right? But to be fair, to that generation, like they from cradle to grave, they've been reared on television,
Hmm.
and anything that's on the television is treated as absolute truth, is just gospel. And our generation is the one that came of age with the internet, and the internet has um, allowed alternate explanations and theories and ideas to be proliferated much more broadly and wider. And it makes, in one sense, it makes propaganda a lot harder. Although they've clamped down on the internet, and they've restricted free speech and so forth. But um, it's it's still the great issue with propaganda is um, with things like this. Like if you could tell a lot, like, so say you are, you work for um, the IDF or whatever, or you work for the American media, um,
I don't
right?
work for the IDF. I'm a
Yeah,
taxpayer.
that's
Sorry, go ahead.
yes, but like say you're working for them, like, and the truth is, like, your country's been attacked. You have hundreds. I think it's like 1,200 now, apparently, of civilians, men, women, and children that have been murdered and raped and tortured and kidnapped. And so, like, that's true. That happened. But the temptation, when you are part of the narrative formation industry, is you take the truth and it's very easy to embellish it, right? Because you take the things that are true, but you want to produce a narrative um that will manufacture consent among mass population for particular policy goals. Right.
Yeah.
And so and part of the thing, this is something I tweeted and wrote about, is it's not just right. And the question is, well, if all of this stuff happened, and it did, right, why would they need to lie about this? Right? Why would they lie? And it's because the
Hmm.
truth is often really complex.
Yeah, it's true.
And when you're dealing with the masses, they can't handle complexity at all.
Hmm.
Right? Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
And so if you have a single event that can represent the whole, and is easily digestible by, 80 to 110 IQ people, right, which is the middle of the bell curve. And right, if you have something that's easily digestible, and then they can understand the conflict in that way, and then they're yours, right? And so, and then you can, like, so for the American population, right,
Yeah,
if we go to,
it's all about mobilizing and manufacturing public consent on both
yeah,
sides. On both sides. Both sides
oh
have
yeah,
to do it.
yeah,
It's sort of like that's the realpolitik of manufacturing consent is
yeah,
you have to take something bad and you have to twist it in order to get it inside these little bumper sticker sized
yes,
talking points. And the more and if you can sway public opinion toward your way, then you will win the war.
yeah,
That's how it works.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it's obviously it's simple to say, all right, Israel was attacked, innocent people were killed by Hamas. That's why we need to support the United States going into Lebanon or bombing Iran or whatever, or
Right.
being involved in the war in some way. Um, and that's like the purpose. That's the point of it, is to get the American public on that side, or even to pressure American politicians and the White House and so forth to give give the Israelis a really long rope, right? To give them a ton of freedom to do whatever they want in response, because there's going to be backlash as soon as the IDF goes in, and now you are seeing Palestinian kids, turned into goo and killed. Then people are going to forget, right? That's what every single time this stuff has happened. That's what's occurred is
Mhm.
some outrage, some horrific thing that Hamas does prompts the Israelis to respond in force, and then they kill a bunch of Palestinians, and everybody forgets why they went there in the first place. And so whether or not it's true, like they want to do this in order to make very simple, basic bumper sticker argument of why it's okay for them to do it. And so, and in particular, why it's okay for the United States to support whatever they do, and even to back them up. Like I don't, I mean, we can get into later what realistically the United States will be asked to do
Mhm.
militarily and everything like that. But um, at this point, like the narrative formation stuff is important because we are constantly lied to,
Mhm.
like you said, our generation knows that we're lied to about everything, and it's like, um, if we're lied to about this, right, you shouldn't be okay with it, even if you're like, no, they were attacked, that you have zero sympathy for Hamas whatsoever. um it still should bother you that you're being that potentially, at least, and that's the thing. It's like, I don't know if it's true or not, right? I have no idea, and that's what I've said. I'm like, I don't know if it's true. I mean, it
This
seems
is
like
like,
one of the things they do, like the Ghost of Kiev. That's what I keep going back to. Is like, I remember 2 years ago when it's like, yeah, this
mhm.
Ukrainian fighter pilot shot down 7,000 MiGs, and it's actually, and then Eric Swalwell or whoever tweets
Yeah,
tweets a picture of Sam Hyde. It's like, we've identified him. But
yeah,
like that
that's
that like
yeah.
that kind of that level of stuff is what occurs, and so you have to be skeptical, you have to be wary, and you can't and like my position on the conflict, and I'm sure yours is too, is that like Hamas is evil. No one should support them, but at the same time, like the Israeli influence on American foreign policy over the last 40 years is not good either. Like we shouldn't just emotionally give them a blank check to influence our politics, and cause us to go into the Middle East again for another disastrous $1 trillion war somewhere. Right?
Mhm.
That's my biggest concern, is like for my own country. Right? It's like,
Well,
if
this
they
is
want to
the
take care of
thing.
themselves, I want to care. I want to care about America and my country.
Yeah,
Right?
this is ultimately the thing. What they hate, what the regime hates, what the political interests on both sides hate is you to take an America first position where you say, actually, like, because I do have my personal opinions on what's going on over there, but what they hate is if I say I actually don't care very much compared to what's going on in America. Like
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro's freak out over
Over
Tucker
Tucker.
Carlson,
Yeah.
yeah, over Tucker Carlson's concern about immigration and drugs was I think a perfect embodiment of how the
Yes.
regime treats
Yeah.
those who don't have emotional investment in what's going on in their priorities. I mean, this is the thing that strikes me the most is
Yeah.
you have to care, you have to take a position. Otherwise, you hate, you're anti-Semitic or whatever. You have
Yeah.
to take a position, and I reject that entirely. I do have my own personal opinions, but for those that don't have their own personal opinions, they're like, look, at the end of the day, I just care about America. I think that's a very respectable and appropriate perspective to have right
Yeah.
now.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it is. And yeah, that like the Tucker is in all of this the only major figure who speaks with the priorities of Americans first,
Hmm.
right? As the top priority, right?
Hmm.
Is what is good for our country. What are our problems and issues that we have? I mean, if it demonstrates anything, it and we can go into this as well later, but it is showing that mass migration and multiculturalism in America and in the West is an absolute. I mean, obviously it's an absolute failure, but it it's become obvious that we've imported these people that have these ethnic blood feuds,
Mhm.
and we should have no part in that at
Mhm.
all. This is not like I don't want to see Hamas flags and Palestinian flags waved around in major cities and in elite universities. I don't want that, right? I
Right.
don't want to I don't want these people here. They shouldn't be here, right?
Mhm.
They are not Americans, right? They don't have this priority, and like for that matter, the other side of it too is right. I see all of these people saying, "Well, I'm an American citizen, but my heart is with Israel," and like these people that are like dual citizens and things like that. It's like, well, or America's interests or Israel's interests, and so on and so forth. And it's like, no, you need to pick one, right?
Yeah.
When the interests of America and Israel conflict, which side do you take?
Mhm.
And that's your country,
Yeah.
right? And
Dual
so
dual citizenship needs to go away.
yeah,
You
and
can't
so
yeah.
yeah, and so like when you think about something like Ben Shapiro, who isn't a dual citizen as far as I know, I think he's only an American citizen, but
Mhm.
obviously very pro-Israeli. Um, right? If there's a conflict in Ben Shapiro between American interests and Israeli interests, and I think there often is. Which side does he take? Well, he takes Israel's side,
I don't
right? Or
think
even
he I don't
even
think he
Anthony
could
Blinken,
yeah. I don't think, Ben Shapiro can conceive of an America First interest.
no,
I think he sort of latched on, to the conservative reaction to the left over the last, 7 years or whatever,
yeah.
but I don't think conceptually he has an idea of what it means to be America First and have American priorities.
Well, no, he views America as an economic zone,
Mhm.
right? I mean, that really that's how he views America. He doesn't view America. He's like, oh, it's this proposition nation. You see some of his past statements on immigration. The tweet. I don't care about the browning of America. All I care about is their ideology or whatever. And it's like, and people latch onto this stuff and they look at it. And I mean, I see people replying to me like, no, like, you if you want to have the same perspective on America that Ben Shapiro has on Israel, that is white supremacy, right? Because
Mhm.
you're treating it like an ethno state, because Israel's an ethno state. Even though people will bicker with that and say, well, no, there's plenty of Arabs there and other people, but largely, right, that's what it is,
Well, but
right?
that's what an ethno state means.
Yeah,
This is the
yeah,
thing.
exactly.
An ethno state doesn't mean that an individual of another like ethnicity can't set foot into your country. That's a
Yeah,
complete
yeah.
made up scenario. So
It's just it's silly category errors,
yeah,
but at any rate, it's like, well, this was originally American immigration policy was we are going to import people that can assimilate to our culture, our way of life, our religion,
right,
all of our heritage and history, and adopt it as their own, right?
right,
Which people are more likely to do that?
yeah.
And I just pose it with people. It's like people, well, what's the standard? How do you determine that? And it's like, oh, like it. I just said, I
Oh
said,
yeah,
I just said, like, does the person come from a country where they put their shopping carts back in the cart corral when they're done? Right. That's
yeah,
that's that's a pretty good standard. And
yeah.
it's like,
It's funny though, like because this is the classic like Jacobin mistake because we
yeah,
can't make everything precise like math. It can't be like
yeah,
you can't have
yeah,
these precise answers. We therefore can have zero answers.
yeah,
Like that's
exactly.
that's retarded.
Yeah,
Am I allowed? Am I
well,
allowed to say? I
yeah,
said
you
the R
said
word.
it. You said it. Now we're in trouble. But no, I mean, seriously though, it's like that was the priority for American immigration really until the mid 20th century is which people are able to be assimilated into our country and which ones are not.
Mhm.
And that's a priority because we care about the good of our population that exists here now. And even the even most conservative, uh, you know, somewhat skeptics of mass migration. Right. So people will be like, no, Ben Shapiro's against I listen to his show all the time. Like, I don't know how you can do it. But I listen to his show all the time and
Yeah.
and he's totally against the invasion at the border. And it's like, okay, yeah, okay, he's against illegal immigration, but I'm against legal immigration.
Right.
Um,
And
like,
he's against immigration on like technocratic terms.
yeah. Yeah.
like because the welfare state can't provide for everybody, we therefore need to rethink the total quantity. It's like this total technocratic
Yeah.
managerial expert class
Yeah.
approach to immigration. Has nothing to do with culture. You're not allowed to bring up ethnicity. You're not allowed to bring up you have to be restrained within the confines of legality and illegality. So
Mhm.
it's that's fake. That's a fake immigration
And
policy.
and you see that because you look at his views of Israel, like the tweet that he has about like Western narcissists thinking that all cultures are the same and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
he obviously thinks like we do when it comes to Israel,
Hmm.
but when it comes to the economic zone that he likes to plunder, called America, he doesn't care, right?
Yeah,
He just views it as a place to make money and
yeah.
to that anybody in the world can come to as long as they believe in free
And
market
he's like,
economics or something,
now
you
he's
know?
like fundraising for the IDF. He's like, my pillow for the IDF, and it's like he's sitting there. I don't know. We can
Yeah,
talk about Ben Shapiro more later. I actually want
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I actually want to step back a little bit, and talk about like what this means, like what's happening in the world, because this isn't just like a conflict. This seems to be, in fact, we talked a couple like a month ago about when we had Pete Q on about the
Mhm.
meaning of the Ukraine conflict and the need for
Yeah,
Israel's needs for expansions and stuff.
yeah,
How do you think things like that play out in light of this? Because you and I were
yeah,
talking before we went live.
yeah,
I think Israel is going to completely wipe out Gaza.
yeah.
So how do we reassess what's happening in Eastern Europe and the Middle East?
Oh, yeah, I mean, Pete's theory, which I'm like, "Oh, maybe it's legit," is that, they want to, depopulate Ukraine and settle, their people there and make it, Israel too. And because most of these people, that's where they came from.
Hmm.
Um, is is Eastern Europe, is, the Pale of Settlement and so forth.
Yeah.
And so they also in one sense view that as their homeland, even if they also view Israel as their homeland. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, some of it is like they're just it's not a big country, right? It's not a big country at all, and geographically and population wise. Although population, like it's one of the few modern um, post-industrial states that has a positive birth rate, and so they're running out of room. I mean, that's
Hmm.
that's part of why the conflict is happening, because they are pushing out the Palestinians to build settlements. That, over the last 20 years, that was the big conflict point,
Hmm.
is, construction of settlements and all of that. And so there's not like, where do they go, right? Where can they go? And so, yeah, maybe they go back to Eastern Europe. I don't know. And especially if the conflict is extremely hot, right? If Hezbollah in the north is, launching these incursions, continually, if Hamas, doesn't get wiped out and is able to now, um, conduct offensive operations like this, on a semi-regular basis, that is, you're not going to want to live there
Hmm.
too. And so, I mean, will there be a diaspora that returns to like the United States and to Europe? Possibly. That could be one outcome here. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what happens because, right, the
But like
picture is,
what we talked about before we went on was the
yeah,
fact that the world opinion is changing on Israel.
yeah,
People are getting frustrated with it. So I mean, this could
yeah,
be, and we could talk about the podcast that with Martyr made, and some of the points that he made, because
yeah,
this could get really nasty for Israel, because it seems like the only solutions they have are going to continue to exacerbate the problems they have with world opinion right now.
yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, and that's the whole point of Hamas doing this. Like, they clearly didn't think that they could launch these raids and, conquer Israel militarily. They
Hmm.
they they knew that. Like, the point of it is they wanted to provoke a reaction
Right.
as intense as possible, from the Israelis, and then everyone would forget, because this is what has happened in all the previous instances of these conflicts. Everyone forgets, the atrocities that they commit, and all they see is, dead Palestinian children, week after week after week. And in particular, the Arab countries and Europe. Europe is not anywhere near as pro-Israeli as America is.
Right.
Um, and even without, thinking about the massive Muslim population in all these European countries, I mean, just the European left is like, you know the AOC Ilhan Omar
Hmm.
caucus in Congress, times 1,000. Like they have way more of them there, right? And so, um that the pressure that would be on Israel after this, because I think, yeah, they're going to attack. They're going to, and a point that Daryl, made in this podcast. We'll have to link to it, I think, because people should listen to, because I think it's really good information about just the tactical and strategic, military, um,
Hmm.
facts on the ground. And so, like, they have a good handle on this stuff, and I think they're right. Um, is like they're going to go in and attack, and they're going to attack because, like, Israel's a small country. It's like 10 million people spread out over very small geographic areas. So it's like the state of my that I live in, Minnesota, is like 8 or 9 million people. And so if 1,200 people were killed in Minnesota this last week in an attack like this, like, I would know probably somebody that was killed, and I would have family members that would know somebody. Like, everybody there knows somebody, so it's incredibly personal, right? In a way that maybe we can't comprehend so readily. And so the rage, I mean, I could see people being like Ben Shapiro and just saying, like, nuke them and destroy them, kill them all, like that. I could see why they would react that way. And so the rage that they have is palpable. And so I think, like, this is kind of it. Like, I think they want to deal with Gaza once and for all. I don't think they want to have some kind of ceasefire and negotiated solution. I think they want to just go in and wipe them out,
Hmm.
and then, the survivors, flood into Europe and America.
Hmm.
That's probably, and you could already see that idea being
Yeah,
seeded.
this is it's an interesting because there is, like, the pro-Palestinian third world mentality that has kind of infiltrated America is sort of it can work together with Israel's president, the Likud party's current interests, I should say. Because Likud can force them out, Israel can force them out. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to England and America. They're going to go to Western Europe and America.
England, France, Germany,
Yeah.
America,
So
Sweden, like that's
so
where
it's
they're gonna
like,
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
both political interests are going to get their way on this one.
So yeah,
So
where
it'll be
America's
interesting.
gonna be, given the gift of diversity of 1 million Palestinians
Yeah.
is probably what will happen. And
Yeah.
that's part of, like, the propaganda stuff. Like,
And that's
why?
why I've been so critical of
Um,
Israel. I mean, this is kind of what, like, Israel's activities over the last several decades have radicalized the Middle East, but it's also pushed a lot of these people into Western Europe.
yeah,
Because of Israel's endeavors, because of their interests and objectives.
and they
You know, they
want them to go to Western Europe and
That's what
America.
I'm saying.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I'm
they
saying.
want
They're
it.
working.
It's not like, oops, sorry, we didn't mean for the refugee crisis to happen. It's
Right.
like they want it.
Hmm.
And just, I mean, American policy, under the Obama administration in Syria, right? They don't like Assad. They wanted to get rid of Assad. They're already, like, attack. They bombed the two Syrian airfields in the last
Right.
week as well. Like they and that's part of, like, America getting dragged into this. Right, we don't have the forces in being to be able to, like, invade Iran. So I don't think. I mean, I don't know if we talked about that recently, but it's like, um, the American military is depleted. There's maybe 100, little over 100,000 infantrymen in the entire U.S. Army, active duty at least. I mean, there's reservists and National Guard and things like that, but like the active duty, like, you have a couple divisions, right? So you're not going to be able to invade and occupy a massive country like Iran with you need millions in order to
Hmm.
do that.
Hmm.
And on top of that, there's no, all of the strategic reserves of artillery shells, missiles, equipment, everything. All of that's gone to Ukraine, and
Hmm.
so in order to mobilize like millions of and we don't have the manufacturing capacity to like just backfill that instantly. And so even if they wanted to like give Lindsey Graham what he wants and attacking Iran, they could they can't
Mhm.
do it. And so but Syria is much smaller. And maybe that's where they want to go. Like that's been a priority. Like if not Iran, then Syria, right? Is kind of the way of thinking, and the way of thinking of the Israelis as well. And so that's part of it. Is like why do you dispute the propaganda? Do you love Hamas? And it's like, no, I don't want America to get involved in another war where thousands of our people, and it like literally is our people, like the mega chud is who is the one that puts on body armor and a rifle and goes and fights for the army. Like
Mhm.
that's who they need. That
Right.
they need our consent, right? The typical Trump voter, they need our consent to go fight this war, and that's how they manufacture it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Is
I mean, Israel, we talked about this last week. Like, what does an empire do when it's dying? Is it starts wars? The
Yeah,
best way to get our people on board is to make it about Israel. I mean, this like
yeah,
there's no other place on earth that would that would inspire Americans, like fly over Americans to go fight and die. But
yeah.
Israel is the exception, and so
Greatest
makes
ally,
it,
God's chosen people. We need to go defend them.
yeah,
Like
right.
that. I mean, on one hand, they're very stupid people, but on the other hand, like they know what works, right? They know what what heartstrings to grab hold of, and this is one of them. And so that's why you need to be wary of it, not because like you have any sympathy whatsoever for Hamas and Palestine, but because you understand that these people wield tremendous influence over American policy, and they provide no benefit to us whatsoever. Right? That's the other
Right.
thing. It's an entirely one-sided relationship where American billions flood in. The American military goes and fights their enemy Saddam Hussein and ousts him and kills hundreds of thousands of people, devastates that country and expends $1 trillion that we're still
Hmm.
paying for today. Like, when you go to the grocery store, it's not just Ukraine and COVID and everything else that you're paying for. You're also still paying for Iraq. And they want us to do it again. And you need to be able to say, no, no, we're not going to do it again. Right. You can
Hmm.
take care of yourself. You can take care of your
Hmm.
own country. Um, and that needs to be like, you need to become impervious to propaganda, right? You need to become impervious to these calls of needing to do something, um, and just say no. Our country, like Tucker, our country is literally being invaded. 100,000 Americans died from fentanyl last year that is provided by the cartels, right? It who, if we want to like,
I can just hear Ben Shapiro. Well, what does that have to do with it? What does that have to do with Israel? Can you imagine?
I know that's exactly what he says, and And
Uh,
it's like, okay, if you want to draw an analogy between like Gaza and Hamas and anything, it's the cartels and Mexico,
yeah.
right? If anyone in America cared about Americans, anyone with power, we would we would be launching airstrikes in Mexico in response to that.
Hmm.
Right. That's what would be happening. It would be a failed state. We'd send troops in and invade and occupy the place, and not have to deal with fentanyl anymore,
Yeah.
right? And not have to deal with mass migration anymore in a flooded border, right?
Hmm.
We'd take 100 miles from the border and occupy that and totally militarize it, and that's it. It's done, right?
Right.
Like that's what an actual functioning state would do. Or you'd be if the Mexican government has actually did have monopoly on force, you would just threaten them and say you need to deal with this,
Hmm.
and if you can't, then we will, right? That's what a functioning state that cares about its people would do, and we don't have that. And it's like, yeah, Ben Shapiro, I would love it if we had an American Netanyahu. That would be nice. Like somebody who cares about our people and is like, a
Yeah.
hawk for our people and our people's interests. We don't have anything like that at all. And so yeah, him freaking out at Tucker over that. It's like, no, these people chose to do fentanyl. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah, that's exactly how it works. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Um, like it's so funny to see this play out because like this guy doesn't actually care about America at all. Like he's just a shill for Israel,
Yeah,
right? He doesn't care about our country. It's all about his country.
yeah.
And so anyway, yeah, we're gonna keep going back to him, I'm sure. But
So I wanted to reference an article on my favorite website, which is uns.com. So one of my favorite commentators on the Middle East and geopolitics is Pepe Escobar. Have you read him?
I don't think I have. No.
Yeah, so I always pay attention to what he says and I take him very seriously. But he has this article on UNS, the geopolitics of Al Aqsa. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Al Aqsa, I think, or Al Asa or whatever.
Oh,
That's the name of the operation, Al Asa flood.
okay.
Um,
Your guess is as good as mine. Okay.
yeah, so he just says basically that Hamas's operation was meticulously planned, but the launch date was conditioned by two triggering factors, right? Because this is always the thing. One day, for no reason at all, Hamas attacked Israel, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
like the line that's being pushed.
Yeah.
But he says the first factor was Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu flaunting his new Middle East map at the UN General Assembly in September, in which Netanyahu completely erased Palestine and made a mockery of every single UN resolution on the subject. So, in other words, Israel's been, needing to wipe out Gaza for some time now. And then he
Yeah.
says, second are the serial provocations at the Holy Al Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, including the straw that broke the camel's back. 2 days before the Al Aqsa flood, on the 5th of November, at least 800 Israeli settlers launched an assault around the mosque, beating pilgrims, destroying Palestinian shops, all under the observation of Israeli security forces.
Is it 5th of November or October?
October. I think
Okay.
I said
Yeah.
October. But yes,
Okay.
so it's 2 days before the 7th, which is when
Okay.
the
Yep.
invasion happened. So everyone with a functioning brain knows Al-Aqsa is a definitive red line, not just for Palestinians, but for the entire Arab and Muslim worlds. So it's like, so these sorts of taunts are causing these extremist reactions. And this is kind of like the
Yeah.
pattern because Israel goads people into attacks and then it has justification to do something even more serious to get their way, right? Because this is part of
Yeah.
their plan.
Yeah. And it's
And
not I mean just to pause for a second. It's not like you're saying like the Qataris and Saudis did, right? The immediate letter that they sent out, which now this gives it some context.
Mhm.
Um they send this letter out and it's like basically saying that Israel deserved it. Right? Did you see those
Yeah, yeah,
official
yeah, yeah.
statements that
Right.
the Qataris
But
and
the point is not to
United States.
get bogged down in those, but to
Yeah.
understand like the political rationale. That's what
Yeah,
you have to
what
understand.
motivates this? It
This is
isn't
what
just for no reason. Yeah.
Ron
Yeah.
Paul said this again and again. It's not like
Yeah.
we were sitting here twiddling our thumbs and then the terrorists came and, took out our towers. It's like
Yeah.
you have to understand their rationale, their reasons
Yeah.
for doing things.
Whether you agree with their rationale
Right.
or buy it or think there's any justification for it or whatever, like, but there is one. Like
Right.
that's the thing.
You
Like,
have
and
to
that's
understand.
usually like people that are heavily propagandized. It's just yeah, just like whoa, yeah, for no reason at all, it just happened.
Yeah.
Um, like you have to understand that there are motivating factors for anything. It's not just random.
Hmm.
And
Exactly.
so like, yeah, I think that's important. Yeah. So continue on. This is interesting.
So yeah, so then he goes, I'm gonna skip a paragraph here. It goes, sections of the West applauding the upcoming ethnic cleansing, including Zionists, posing as analysts, saying out loud that the
Yeah.
population transfers that began in 1948 must be completed. Believe that with massive weaponry and massive media coverage, they can turn things around in short shrift. In other words, they're losing like the manufactured consensus, and so they're trying to turn
Mhm.
things around. They need to annihilate the Palestinian resistance and leave
Manufactured consensus in Israel or just
in
throughout the
the
world?
world, in the Western
Yeah.
world, they're
Yeah.
trying to turn it around because the
Yeah.
Likud party has completely destroyed Israel's reputation, basically.
Okay. Yeah. That's
And
what
they
it
need
seems.
to leave Hamas allies like Hezbollah and Iran weakened,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of their point.
That's a big
So
priority. Yeah.
yeah, so then he says that brings us to the cost of launching this new war on terror. The propaganda is in full swing for Netanyahu in Tel Aviv. Hamas is ISIS, which is a complete lie. Hamas
Yeah.
and ISIS are at odds with each other and hate each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
Anyways, for Zelensky in Kiev, Hamas is Russia. Over one
Yeah.
October weekend, the war in Ukraine was completely forgotten by Western mainstream media. Blah blah blah. Yeah. So then he says Egyptian. So then he talks about the Egyptian intel, which was saying that it warned Tel Aviv about the attacks,
Hmm.
and the Israelis chose to ignore it, as they did the Hamas training drills they observed in the weeks prior. So Hamas has been training, and they've completely
To
ignored
do
it.
something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, then he says, this is the good part. So Israel is inevitably turned to battering the Gaza Strip, an encircled cage of 365 square kilometers packed with 2.3 million people. That's insane, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
The
that's like the population density of like Hong Kong,
right,
right? Yeah,
right. And then Israeli Defense Minister Gallant proclaimed a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, food, fuel. Everything is closed. We're fighting human animals, and we will act accordingly. So, in other words, they've been preparing to wipe out the Gaza Strip in accordance with Netanyahu's plans that he announced to the UN in September.
yeah,
Meanwhile, um, he talks about how Ukraine's been funneling weapons to the Palestinians. So they've been supporting this. The entire thing was basically like a
yeah,
prep for a Palestinian-Israeli standoff.
yeah,
But then it gets interesting because he says that the immediate consequence of the Al Aqsa flood is that the Washington neocon dream of normalization between Israel and Arab world is simply going to vanish if this turns into a long war. Large swaths of the Arab world are already normalizing their ties with Tehran, and not only inside the newly expanded BRICS 11. In other words, the
yeah.
power dynamics of the world are completely shifting toward Russia and BRICS.
So is he saying there's going to be some sort of rapprochement with between the Saudis and the Iranians? Because I mean that's like the main conflict
That's I mean,
center.
he thinks that yeah, that in itself is sort of a proxy for America's standoff with the East.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Which I mean that's I mean when you talk about like trying to think through geopolitics and what's going on is eh, yeah, the result could be all right at the end of this Israel gets Gaza and wipes out the Gazans and depopulates it, and that threat is neutralized. Um,
right.
but
Yes.
the cost of that will be the entire Arab world, which used to be split between Iran and Saudi Arabia,
Hmm.
would be united against them.
Right. And
Okay.
he
Yeah.
says that the Russia China Iran alliance, is being demonized in the Western media as the new axis of evil, right,
Yeah.
by the Western
Yeah.
neocons. So they're prepping for this. So what this means in the immediate future is that the American dream of interfering across the five seas does not ever qualify as not even qualify as a mirage. The
Mhm.
Al Aqsa flood has just buried the recently announced and much ballyhooed EU, Israel, Saudi Arabia, India transportation corridor. In other
Yeah.
words,
Yeah.
they're preparing like an entirely new set of allies to
Yeah.
confront our own efforts or our own interests and interconnectivity in the Middle East. China
Yeah.
is keenly aware of all this taking place only a week before its third belt and road forum in Beijing. At stake
Hmm.
are the BRI connectivity corridors that matter across the heartland, across Russia, plus the maritime Silk Road and the Arctic Sea. His point is that this is going to be a
Hmm.
standoff with the East. The geopolitical repercussions of this event will speed up Russia, China, and Iran's interconnected geoeconomic and logistical connections, bypassing the hegemon and its empire of bases. Increased trade and nonstop cargo movement are all about business on
Yeah.
equal terms with mutual respect. Yeah, so not exactly the war party scenario for a destabilized Western Asia. In other words, this is
Yeah.
only going to strengthen the East, and this is going to accelerate and expand to the world. So,
Yeah. Strengthen and unify it against the United States and Western Europe, and basically establish um, pretty clear conditions for lasting conflict. Whether it's, I mean, active hot war, probably not. But I don't, because that's the thing. Like Russia and China. I mean, that's anytime you bring up the conflict between the East and the West, people think, well, the Russians are going to invade and the Chinese are going to invade, and it's like,
they don't need to. They can just use
yeah,
proxies.
yeah, they don't need, and that's how it,
Yeah,
it is. Is it just proxy wars?
that's how
Um,
America's. That's how the
yeah,
last 20 years have been.
yeah, and um,
In fact, America set up Hamas.
and Israel did
Well,
too
yeah, they
as
work
a
together to
counter
do
to the
that.
PLO. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, it is their own creation that has come back to haunt them and bite them.
Hmm.
And so anyway, yeah, it is it's the neoconservative moment is quickly, I think, vanishing. That they're not able to accomplish their goals that they set out to create. Like they wanted the Middle East to be unstable because it's easier to play different sides off each other and manipulate it and pursue your goals that way. But if they're united against you and with the Chinese and the Russians, that's not good. And on top of this, it's like, we always go back to like how stupid the regime is. Like they're very stupid people. And here you are, you have this situation where you could lose the Saudis, right? If I'm understanding it correctly, right? I mean, maybe that relationship still's incredibly
It
tight.
seems
It
more
seems
like
more
it's
tenuous than ever,
seems
though.
yeah, it seems more like they're trying to reroute all these, trade corridors, and they're trying to reconstruct
Yeah,
things and leave
give themselves an out,
the
maybe.
American allies kind of just out to water.
Yeah,
They're trying that's what his point is they're kind of redirecting things, and they're taking no interest in participating with us in the East.
yeah. So not necessarily abandoning the United States, and they're not going to cut the
Or
Americans off of oil, but they could. That's if you set it up this way, where
it's
you're
just that they
pivoting
don't
to the
want to be
east.
dependent on us
Yeah,
anymore because we
and
can't be trusted.
it's understandable. Right? It's
Yeah.
understandable that they would want to have options. But then you have like the craziest thing in all of this is the American regime is totally dead set against American energy independence. So America could be in a situation where it doesn't need Saudi Arabia at all. We have all of the oil and gas that we ever could want or need, but we're not allowed to get it. Right? Like it's insane. Like from like a geopolitical strategic perspective, that they wouldn't want American industry to be here and production to be here and oil and gas to be produced here. They and so like all of the America last domestic priorities of the regime leave them which are obvious, right? They hate us and hate our country and hate our people. But it it causes them to have way more levers to manipulate globally and geopolitically,
Mhm.
right? And so it like they painted themselves in a corner with all of this because of their zealous anti Americanism domestically.
Mhm.
And so like that I mean some of it is like I don't get what they're doing, but I do get what they're doing, they 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 hate us and they want to be able to manipulate the globe and wield all this power globally, but not for our benefit at all. And so I guess, so what do you think, a month from now, right? Lord willing, we'll still be here recording this podcast a month from now or around Christmas time, right? What what do things look like, or a year from now, right? What do things look like when it's all said and done?
Man, that's the thing. I don't. Well, first of all, the thing that I don't think is going to happen is a normalization of, I don't think things are going back. I think
No.
this is a significant turning point to something.
Yeah.
So the question is whether it's like, I don't necessarily buy into like the complete like third like World War III,
No.
in the same sense as World War II, like this like where we're all being drafted and all that stuff.
No.
So I don't see that, but I do see increased stabilization. I also see a lot more economic pain, a lot more
Mhm.
inflation.
Mhm.
Like I think the economic pain that's coming it's just like this slow decline. It's not like this
Mhm.
big stock market crash, end of the world scenario,
Yeah,
like
nobody has any jobs, it's all over. Yeah.
apocalypse style. But I do think it's just increased pain, like
Yeah.
layoffs,
Mhm.
um and more economic pain, and just more strife. I think there's going to be a lot more, like especially in city centers. I think there's going
Yeah.
to be a lot more reflection of third world agitators.
Mhm.
I think the immigration could even double, from what's happening right now. They're just going to continue to be pouring in, and we're going to be culturally and economically surrounded. And I think that's sort of the 4 to 5 year game plan. It's just this
Mhm.
slow choking of our way of life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the black pill for today. But I think, I mean, I
I
agree
mean,
with you. Although,
even if you are like on the medium term white pill, like you
yeah.
are, I mean, you and I both agree that things have to get worse before we can come out of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, and like this kind of stuff, like I think for Americans, for heritage Americans to be deprogrammed from the liberalism that you oh, dominates our brains and our hearts, and to be able to say, no, we don't want these people here, right? I mean, I think that's going to continue to grow,
Hmm.
right? I don't think you can watch Hamas celebrations occur in your country and think, oh, wow, diversity is our strength. Isn't it so great that we have the ability to eat all these different kinds of foods and have all of these different people in our? Isn't that great? Like, no, I think normal regular people are like, why are they in our country? Why
Hmm.
are they here? Get them out of here.
Hmm.
They need to be gone. And that sentiment will grow, and I think that's a necessary condition for any kind of American renewal. Is like one, just understanding what's going on,
Yeah.
understanding that your country is being invaded and your way of life is being destroyed by people who don't put their shopping carts back, and, and it's like that is right. What people have to understand is um your country's gone, or you're losing it, and you need to fight it.
Yeah.
And heretofore, we haven't there hasn't been any resolve whatsoever. I mean, flickers of it during the early Trump years, but there hasn't been any resolve whatsoever to deal with this conflict directly. Right? It's always been kind of like, well, we're against illegal immigration, and that's bad. And like you said, for these technocratic managerial reasons, like, well, we just can't afford it. It's like,
Yeah.
no, even if we could, they got to go. You got to go
Y-
back.
Yeah.
This is not good. And if you're and you can see this in Western Europe, like the AfD is more popular than it has ever been in Germany, and and Germans are completely um, dominated mentally, right,
Yeah.
by the middle of the way more than Americans are, obviously, by the middle of the 20th century with guilt and all of this stuff. And even they are beginning to say, no, we can't have tens of millions of Muslims in our country. We don't want that. This is not good.
Yeah. The
And
funny thing
so
about the
that has to
AFD,
happen.
because Paul knows the FD really well because he
Yeah.
speaks German and he's got a lot of contacts over there. But he's funny because he's like, we're being told that the AFG is like the rise of the new like Nazi party or whatever. He's like, the head of the AFD is a lesbian,
Is a
and
lesbian.
like,
Yeah. I
yeah,
know.
she's
I know.
they're like the GOP basically but things are so
Yeah.
bad over there that they look like this way out.
Yeah.
So it's
This
just
like
funny.
hardcore
It's
right
not
wing
funny.
party. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You know,
yeah.
it is. And like, no, it's not funny. And the same thing with like the GOP in America. Like it is nowhere near as hardcore as it needs to be,
Hmm.
and yet the sentiment is growing. I mean, you see this even with the recent polling. Like there was polling out of Pennsylvania that Trump has like a 10-point lead in Pennsylvania over
Hmm.
Biden, which is astounding. And we haven't even talked about any of that yet. But
Yeah.
I think, and we haven't even talked about like Trump vis-a-vis Netanyahu either. Did I bring that up? I can't remember. We talked about a little bit about before we recorded, but um, it's interesting because obviously Trump is this very pro-Israeli guy and made no bones about that. I mean, I think that's a big reason he was allowed to win the GOP nomination in 2016 is he had to be, right?
Hmm.
And yet he feels very betrayed by Netanyahu,
Hmm.
who immediately after the most secure election of all time um, uh, congratulated Biden for winning the presidency and didn't support Trump in his, um, kind of quixotic campaign against the fortification in the election. And so he feels betrayed by him. And you see this in the speech this week where he says something like, the Soleimani raid, Israel wouldn't take part in it. Netanyahu didn't help out at all, but he took credit for it. That's okay. Like
Yeah.
like he he's very bitter towards him, but there's a strategic political reason why is because Netanyahu is now very very unpopular in Israel
Yeah.
because the people there believe he failed them.
Yeah.
right? They
No,
believe that
exactly.
he failed miserably, and their attitude is way different than America, where it's like, yeah, we're gonna stand behind George Bush after 9/11. They're like, no, you failed, and we need somebody else.
So I know we have like 4 minutes left, but
Yeah,
I guess we wanted to talk about too about how this bears on the election. But what do you think about Ron DeSantis's response to everything and Trump in particular?
yeah.
Stupid or
Oh, yeah. DeSantis is. I mean, you saw the like he clipped part of the video
right?
where Trump is saying that Hezbollah was smart because they attacked where they weren't or whatever, and it's like, how dare he say that, and it's like he's not saying that, oh, I think Hezbollah is great. And it's just this like
I think
extremely desperate, very
it's
fine people hoax that they're trying to,
yeah, it's crazy. It was
you know.
totally like a advisor class, like a GOP
Oh
consultant
yeah,
class move to
yeah,
do that. So it really shines a lot of light on like what type of foreign policy would Ron DeSantis has. I've always been suspicious of it.
yeah.
This is not putting things in his favor for me,
No,
you
it
know.
isn't, and I commented on this and said that like here you had the most impressive governor in America in a long time, right? He stepped up to the plate and fought battles that he should fight. He used power effectively,
Hmm.
and that was very impressive. And we both were praising this guy early on. You could go back to the early episodes of this podcast before we knew what we were doing, and and
I don't.
we
You know
were
what you're
praising
doing?
the guy. Yeah, well, more than I used to,
Okay.
and we're praising the guy and saying how great he is, and they've just ruined him, right? What's he at, like 10% in the polls?
Yeah.
He had no chance, and
Yeah.
maybe somehow he comes in second in Iowa.
They should have just let
Um,
Chris Rufo run his campaign. Someone like that.
he'd
People
be
want
doing a lot better, that's for
people
sure.
people want agitation. They're not into like this old like Bush era GOP
Yeah,
politics.
talk about how great Ronald Reagan is and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
the
Like,
11th
come
commandment
on.
is never criticize. No, the 12th commandment is set fire to the GOP establishment.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's what people
exactly.
want. Yeah.
Like if you and I was talking about this with a friend, and the reason why, like, there are two groups of people that support DeSantis. It is the GOP donor class and consultant class on the one hand, and then on the other, it's like people bitter at Trump because he wasn't the 4D chess, God emperor that they thought he was.
Which is more understandable. But yeah.
Which, yeah, I sympathize with those people, and like those are the two groups, and they're totally at odds with each other,
Hmm.
right? The donor class hates the group that wants, a right wing, hardcore guy, and Trump or DeSantis can't run to Trump's right because the donor class won't let him. But
Right.
the only way that he could possibly have won the nomination is say, okay, Trump, you did this, right? This is your view on immigration or whatever. Well, I'm going to go one step further,
Yeah. Right.
and that could make it a competitive race.
Yeah.
And part of it too is like the guy is just he doesn't have a charismatic bone in his body. Right. I mean, a big thing, and it seems so trivial, but like, mass democracy is trivial, but like in order to do this, you have to be charismatic in one shape or another. And
Yeah.
Trump is very funny. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
He is like a stand up comedian, and like you watch his speeches, and it's entertaining to watch. Like you watch it because it's like better than anything that Hollywood produces for TV.
Hmm.
And and DeSantis goes up there, and he's got kind of this nasally, whiny voice, and sounds, isn't pleasant to listen to, isn't funny or entertaining or really a compelling speaker in any way. And he's just standing on policy, 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 policy. But policy doesn't win elections
Hmm.
in mass democracy, right? I mean, if you had an electorate that was like 90% smaller than it was, and you only you only let a certain number of like people that could vote, right? If you only let people that have 130 IQ and above vote or whatever,
Right.
then maybe he'd have a chance. But that's not how it works. You have everybody gets the right to vote, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to appeal to the lowest common denominator, and
Yeah.
Trump is
And
able to
that
do that,
yeah,
and
and
DeSantis can't.
that's a criticism of our system for sure. But you
Oh
still have to
yeah,
play with the hand that you're dealt. I mean, that's just the way it
exactly,
is. So
exactly. And so it's been really sad to see this campaign, Even for, like I've never been a DeSantis guy, but I don't take any joy in watching um,
Yeah.
this impressive governor self-immolate like he has.
Yeah.
That's not good. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And so
It also shows that you can't have an effective right wing political campaign unless you are completely financially independent, like
yeah,
Trump is.
you have to be a billionaire to be
Hmm.
able to do this kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. And so he has all the conditions necessary. And like thinking about the future, after 2024, right? Who could it be? Right? The only possible conceivable person in my mind, and of course in 2014 or 15, Trump really wasn't on anyone's radar to be this guy. So I leave that out there. It's like, well, maybe he's out there and we're not even thinking about the guy. But the only conceivable guy in my mind is Tucker, right? Is
Right.
is is the only one that
Man, that would be crazy.
it
Man,
would be.
that would be he could beat Trump. I really think he could.
If he had run this time, I think he could too.
But he's smart enough not to oppose Trump.
Yeah,
He's much more than Ron is. Anyways, I think
yeah,
that's it for today.
yeah. There's more to talk about, and we'll probably have to revisit this because I don't think this issue and this
Well,
conflict is going
it's
to go away or anything like
no,
that.
it's very live. It's very early on, and so next
Yeah,
week a whole new world could take place. There are what is the saying? There are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen, and
yeah.
that's
This was
what's
one of
happening
them.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and anything else you want to add? Any writing? Any stuff with Chronicles that you've done that you want to?
Nothing new.
Okay.
Nothing new. Follow me at Contra Mundum.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for this very special bonus episode, and hopefully things continue to get better. Hopefully, hopefully it's not all black pills. I think there are white pills that we dispensed as well. But if you enjoyed the episode, if you thought this was valuable and good information to discuss, please share it, like, subscribe, get it out there, get in front of other people. And thank you so much for listening, for watching, and stay dangerous. And we will see you next time.